What comes to mind when you think of a genius? We often imagine a person who is born with extraordinary gifts, someone who effortlessly absorbs knowledge and produces groundbreaking ideas with ease. Albert Einstein, the man we associate with the theory of relativity, is the epitome of this image. But here's the truth. Einstein was not always the brilliant mind we revere today. In fact, his journey to success was far from straightforward. What if I told you that his early life was riddled with struggles, failures, and setbacks that would have broken most people? How did he transform these early challenges into the cornerstone of his intellectual legacy? You see, we often look at Einstein through the lens of his success. But to understand his true genius, we must first examine the difficult path he traveled to reach it. Behind the well-known stories of scientific breakthroughs and global fame, there were years of personal and professional frustration. As a psychologist, I see this as a classic example of how human resilience and curiosity can lead to extraordinary achievements, even when everything seems to be going wrong. It's a tale of perseverance, failure, and transformation. In this video, we're going to dig deep into the untold story of Einstein's early life, his struggles with school, his failures to land a prestigious academic position, and his quiet years as a patent clerk in Switzerland. We'll explore how each of these moments of perceived failure was a key turning point in his personal growth, shaping the man who would change the world. This isn't just about understanding the history of a genius. It's about understanding how failure, when embraced with the right mindset, can be the catalyst for transformation. Einstein's story is one of resilience, intellectual curiosity, and the quiet pursuit of truth. It's a story that reveals a profound psychological lesson: the power of persistence in the face of setbacks. Through the lens of his early life, we'll uncover how perceived failures are often not ends, but critical opportunities that lead to profound learning, significant growth, and eventually different, often more impactful outcomes. Let's dive in. Welcome to this episode of Behind the Legend. Today, we're diving into a fascinating journey, the untold story of Albert Einstein's early failures, the very moments that set the stage for his rise as one of the greatest minds in history. Most people know Einstein as the genius behind the theory of relativity, the Nobel laureate who changed the course of physics. But what many don't know is that Einstein's early years were filled with struggle and frustration. He didn't just wake up one day and become a genius. His path was full of rejection, doubt, and setbacks, experiences that shaped his psyche and fueled his relentless pursuit of knowledge. In this video, we'll explore Einstein's early academic struggles, the rejections he faced, and how, despite these challenges, he managed to carve his own path to success. We'll also delve into how these early failures became the foundation for his intellectual breakthroughs. As a psychologist, I'll guide you through the psychological aspects of his journey, shedding light on the resilience, curiosity, and mindset that ultimately made Einstein the icon we know today. So join me as we uncover the untold story of Albert Einstein, the story of how his early failures transformed into the stepping stones for his future success. By the end of this video, you'll understand why failure, if we approach it with the right mindset, is not an end, but the beginning of a deeper, more meaningful journey. When we think of Albert Einstein as a child, the image that often comes to mind is that of a prodigy, someone who was obviously gifted from a young age. We might imagine a boy who could already solve complex equations before most of us could even tie our shoes. However, the truth about Einstein's early years is far more complex and far less glamorous than this myth suggests. Einstein was not the star student that many assume. In fact, he was often perceived as a slow learner, especially in his early childhood. Contrary to popular belief, Einstein did not speak until he was around 3 years old, which led to concerns from his parents and teachers. His speech delay was seen as a sign of potential intellectual issues, and some even feared he might never succeed in school. But this initial delay was not a sign of diminished intelligence. Rather, it was a reflection of Einstein's unique way of processing the world around him. As a young boy, Einstein was highly curious, but he often found school to be confining. His rebellious nature clashed with the rigid educational system in place at the time. Teachers and authority figures considered him uncooperative, and his intellectual abilities often went unrecognized. In fact, he wasn't a particularly good student in the traditional sense. His grades were mediocre, and he often struggled to conform to the expectations of his teachers, who valued rote memorization over creative thinking. Psychologically, this early academic struggle could have easily led to a loss of self-confidence. In a system that emphasized conformity, Einstein's individualistic mindset was out of step with the expectations of his teachers. If he had internalized the idea that academic success only came through adherence to rules, he may have given up on his intellectual pursuits altogether. But instead, something remarkable happened. Rather than being defeated by these early challenges, Einstein began to develop an internal resilience that would stay with him throughout his life. This resistance to traditional structures may have even been a catalyst for his intellectual growth. He found a deep connection with mathematics and theoretical physics, subjects that allowed him to explore his own unique thoughts and ideas. Einstein's intellectual journey began to take shape in the absence of external validation. He wasn't driven by the need to please his teachers or impress his peers. His learning was, in many ways, an act of rebellion, a quiet rejection of conventional expectations in favor of a more personal, creative approach to knowledge. What's crucial here is understanding the psychological implications of this period in Einstein's life. When faced with failure and rejection, Einstein did not let these experiences define him. Instead of surrendering to the frustration of not fitting in, he channeled his energy into the things that truly intrigued him. This shift from external validation to internal curiosity is an important theme we'll see again and again in his life. The idea that failure isn't an endpoint, but rather an opportunity for introspection and growth, is at the core of Einstein's story. This period of early struggles at school wasn't a sign of incompetence. It was a sign that Einstein was simply different. This difference was what would later allow him to think beyond the limitations of his time and contribute to some of the most revolutionary ideas in physics. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes our greatest strengths lie in the very things that set us apart from others. As Einstein entered adolescence and adulthood, the pressures of academic life intensified. The narrative of the genius struggling against mediocrity continues, but now the stakes were higher. Einstein had finished his schooling at the Luitpold Gymnasium in Munich and was ready to move on to the next chapter of his life. Unfortunately, that next chapter didn't come easily. Despite his natural affinity for mathematics and physics, Einstein struggled with the standardized academic pathways that were available to him. After failing his first entrance exam to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, Einstein faced a crushing blow. He had hoped that the Polytechnic would be his route to a formal education and a respected career in academia, but instead, he was rejected. The failure of this entrance exam is an especially poignant moment in Einstein's life. He had worked hard for years, preparing for this crucial exam, only to fall short. At this point in his life, Einstein had invested so much of his identity in the idea of becoming a scholar and a physicist, and this failure threatened to unravel his plans. Psychologically, this could have been a devastating moment, one that led him to abandon his dream of being a scientist altogether. However, Einstein's response to this failure is a crucial element in understanding his resilience. Rather than giving up, Einstein took a year off and studied at a different school in Aarau, Switzerland, where his confidence was gradually rebuilt. This is an interesting psychological turning point. Often, failure is seen as an endpoint, but for Einstein, it became an opportunity for reinvention. He wasn't defeated by the initial setback. Instead, he adjusted his approach. He returned to Zurich the following year, passed the entrance exam, and finally enrolled in the Polytechnic. But even after gaining entry into the academic world, his struggles were far from over. Einstein's time at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School was not a smooth ride. He was often at odds with the institution's rigid methods and its authoritarian teaching style. Though his intellectual abilities were impressive, Einstein found it difficult to engage with the conformist culture of the school. This tension between his independent mindset and the structure of the institution likely contributed to his sense of isolation during these years. Einstein's psychological state during this period was one of internal conflict. On the one hand, he had a burning passion for physics, but on the other, he was frustrated by the traditional, structured nature of the academic system. This struggle between conformity and independence, between following external rules and following his own intellectual compass, shaped much of Einstein's academic career. His thoughts were not confined to the classrooms. He would later recount how he spent much of his time thinking deeply about the nature of space, time, and the universe itself, often outside the confines of what was being taught in school. In many ways, Einstein's experience at the Polytechnic is a metaphor for the struggle many creative and intellectual individuals face in traditional educational settings. The conflict between innovative thought and structured learning can feel stifling, and for Einstein, it was an ongoing battle to reconcile his free-thinking nature with the requirements of academia. His time in Zurich, despite being difficult, helped solidify the internal fortitude that would allow him to keep pushing forward in his career. After finishing his studies in 1900, Einstein faced another major hurdle: the inability to secure a permanent academic position. Despite his qualifications, he struggled to find work in a university or research institution. This was a pivotal moment. On one hand, this might seem like the end of the road for someone who aspired to be a scientist. But on the other hand, it was the perfect opportunity for Einstein to step back and reflect on what truly mattered to him. This external failure, his inability to land a teaching or research position, forced Einstein to confront a psychological reality. Success in the traditional academic sense was not going to come easily. So he adapted. Rather than waiting for an academic post, Einstein accepted a position at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern, where he worked as a technical examiner. From the outside, this might have seemed like a step back for a man of his intellectual capabilities. But for Einstein, it became a blessing in disguise. The patent office job, while seemingly mundane, provided Einstein with the space and time to think and write freely, without the pressure of academic politics or the constraints of formal teaching. Working in relative obscurity, Einstein was able to dive deeper into his intellectual pursuits and write some of his most important early works in theoretical physics. The job became a unique kind of laboratory for Einstein's mind, where he could explore his ideas without fear of rejection from the academic world. Psychologically, this shift represents a critical lesson. Sometimes, we need to step away from our grand expectations and allow ourselves the space to grow in unexpected ways. Einstein's time at the patent office didn't just provide him with a paycheck, it gave him the psychological freedom to follow his intellectual passions on his own terms, independent of external approval. The years Einstein spent at the patent office were far from wasted. They allowed him to focus on his intellectual development, and ultimately, they set the stage for his greatest achievements. Through his resilience and willingness to forge his own path, Einstein demonstrated that even when the external world doesn't validate our talents, we can find alternative ways to nurture our passions. The year 1905 would come to be known as Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, his miracle year. But before we dive into this pivotal moment, it's essential to understand just how much groundwork had been laid in relative obscurity prior to it. Einstein's time at the Swiss Patent Office was not marked by grand public acclaim or institutional recognition, but instead, it was a quiet period of relentless thinking, learning, and writing. This is one of the most psychologically profound aspects of Einstein's journey. How, in the absence of external validation, he remained committed to his intellectual passions. For years, Einstein had been grappling with complex scientific ideas, pondering questions that others weren't even asking. And yet, there was no immediate recognition of his potential. No academic position, no prestigious fellowship. His work was not celebrated, often not even read by others in the scientific community. Yet, in his solitude, he had a rare opportunity, the chance to think freely, without the weight of academic pressures bearing down on him. Psychologically, this phase of unseen work is crucial. We tend to measure success by what is visible, the accolades, the fame, the recognition. But Einstein's story reminds us that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs happen when we are working in obscurity, focused on the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. There are no crowds, no applause. There is just the quiet but relentless pursuit of truth. In 1905, Einstein published 4 groundbreaking papers in the journal Annalen der Physik. These papers would radically alter the course of physics and ultimately reshape our understanding of the universe. It's important to note that these papers didn't come from a place of public acknowledgement. Einstein wasn't writing to impress anyone or to gain recognition. He was writing because he felt a deep intellectual need to explore and explain the mysteries of the physical world. The papers ranged from the photoelectric effect, which would later earn him the Nobel Prize in Physics, to his theory of special relativity. These papers are now regarded as some of the most important contributions to modern physics, but at the time, they were largely ignored by the broader scientific community. This period, where Einstein's work went largely unrecognized, offers a powerful psychological lesson. The pursuit of one's passion, no matter how seemingly insignificant or obscure, can have an impact far beyond what we can immediately see. The decision to continue pushing forward, even when the world around us doesn't seem to care, is a hallmark of intellectual resilience. But how did Einstein manage to sustain his motivation, working tirelessly on theories that were, at the time, dismissed by many? The answer lies in his deep intellectual curiosity and self-reliance. For Einstein, the process of thinking and theorizing was more important than external validation. He was driven by a personal need to understand the world, to reconcile the mysteries of physics, rather than to earn prestige or fame. Psychologically, this reflects an intrinsic motivation, one that comes from within rather than from external rewards or approval. For years, Einstein's work was hidden away in the quiet of his apartment, the patent office, and his own mind. But this hidden work was essential to his eventual breakthroughs. It's a reminder that many of our most important contributions happen in the shadows, outside the limelight. The time spent working alone, without recognition, is never wasted. Instead, it becomes the fertile ground from which innovation grows. In hindsight, it's easy to see the brilliance of Einstein's 1905 papers, but at the time, they were barely noticed. The psychological resilience required to push forward without acknowledgement is something we can all learn from. Einstein's ability to continue working, despite the lack of recognition or reward, speaks to the power of intrinsic motivation, of working for the sake of knowledge itself. As we now know, the impact of these papers was profound. The ideas that Einstein introduced would eventually revolutionize the world of physics and challenge centuries-old assumptions about space, time, and energy. The paradox is clear. The most groundbreaking work often happens when no one is watching, and the true value of an idea is not always apparent at first. This paradox is central to understanding the psychological journey of a genius like Einstein. It wasn't the immediate recognition that drove him, but his own unshakable belief in the power of his ideas. By 1905, Einstein's work was still largely ignored, but the eventual impact of his theories would not stay hidden for long. Over time, the scientific community began to take notice of his revolutionary ideas, and it wasn't long before the quiet patent clerk from Bern became a figure of global importance. The story of how Einstein transitioned from obscurity to worldwide fame is one of psychological transformation, a journey from the depths of rejection to the heights of recognition. Let's take a moment to reflect on the profound psychological shift that must have occurred within Einstein during this period. Imagine for a moment being someone who had spent years working in relative isolation, facing setbacks and frustrations at every turn. Then, suddenly, your ideas begin to gain traction. What does it feel like to go from being ignored to being the subject of intense scrutiny and admiration? For someone like Einstein, whose self-worth had not been tied to external validation, this shift would have been both exhilarating and, in some ways, unsettling. In the years following his Annus Mirabilis, Einstein's theories began to gain more attention. The scientific community was gradually drawn to the clarity and boldness of his ideas. Einstein's theory of special relativity, in particular, challenged the foundations of classical mechanics, forever altering our understanding of space and time. However, the road to recognition was not immediate, and the acceptance of his theories was far from a given. One of the key psychological factors that contributed to Einstein's eventual success was his unwavering belief in his work. Even in the face of skepticism and rejection, Einstein maintained a deep conviction in the validity of his theories. This sense of self-assurance, grounded not in external praise, but in internal confidence, was crucial to his rise. It's easy to forget that before he was hailed as a genius, Einstein faced significant resistance to his ideas. Many of his contemporaries were reluctant to embrace his groundbreaking theories, and for a while, Einstein was viewed as an outsider in the scientific community. The psychological strength required to maintain one's convictions in the face of widespread doubt is extraordinary. Einstein was, in essence, his own biggest supporter. His work was not motivated by a desire for fame or prestige, but by a need to understand the universe on his own terms. This internal drive, fueled by curiosity and intellectual independence, helped him weather the years of obscurity and rejection. Over time, however, as his theories gained empirical support and were confirmed through experiments and observations, Einstein's reputation began to grow. His famous 1915 theory of general relativity was a further leap in his intellectual journey, and it would solidify his position as one of the most influential scientists in history. But by then, Einstein had already experienced the profound psychological effects of moving from obscurity to worldwide fame. In many ways, the rise to fame was as much a psychological challenge as it was a professional achievement. Fame brings with it not just recognition, but also the pressure of living up to expectations, the weight of constant public scrutiny, and the burden of being a figurehead for an entire field of study. As Einstein became more famous, he found himself navigating the complexities of celebrity in addition to the complexities of theoretical physics. It's easy to imagine that psychologically, this shift must have been a mixed blessing. The quiet of his early years, spent working in relative anonymity, had offered him the freedom to think and create without the constraints of fame. Yet, as his work gained recognition, the world around him changed dramatically. Einstein became not just a physicist, but a global icon, representing the very notion of intellectual brilliance. He was celebrated as a symbol of genius, someone whose name was synonymous with innovation and intellectual prowess. His fame spread across continents, and soon, Einstein was invited to lecture at prestigious universities, engage in public debates, and serve as a symbol of scientific achievement. But while fame came with benefits, financial security, greater access to resources, and the ability to influence public discourse, it also came with its own set of psychological challenges. Einstein was no longer just an intellectual rebel working quietly in his apartment. He was now a public figure, with all the complexities and pressures that came with that status. His journey from obscurity to fame required him to adapt to a new set of expectations, both from the public and from himself. This transition from a quiet patent clerk to an icon of modern science is a remarkable one, but it also underscores an important psychological lesson. True intellectual transformation often comes in waves. There are the quiet moments of solitary work, where ideas take root, and then there are the moments of recognition, where those ideas impact the world. Both are crucial to the journey. For Einstein, his shift from obscurity to fame was not just a professional milestone, it was a personal evolution, one that required him to balance his internal values with external expectations. The story of Albert Einstein's early struggles is not simply the tale of a brilliant mind overcoming setbacks. It's a powerful reminder that failure, when viewed through the right lens, is often the beginning of a journey rather than the end. The great paradox of Einstein's life is that the so-called failures he experienced were not hindrances, they were stepping stones that ultimately led him to his extraordinary achievements. At various points in his life, Einstein faced rejection, frustration, and isolation. These moments could have easily defined him, but instead, they became transformative experiences. His failure to speak early in childhood, his struggles with formal schooling, the rejection from the Polytechnic, and his difficulty finding an academic position all pointed to one psychological truth: the road to greatness is rarely linear. Yet Einstein did not view these challenges as permanent obstacles. Instead, he saw them as part of his personal evolution. The first universal lesson we can draw from Einstein's journey is the importance of resilience. Resilience is often described as the ability to bounce back after adversity. But it's more than that. True resilience involves the ability to adapt and transform. Einstein didn't simply endure his failures, he used them as fuel for intellectual and personal growth. Each time he encountered rejection or frustration, he turned inward, re-examining his beliefs, his approach, and his goals. This inner strength allowed him to persist despite the external world telling him he was not enough or that his ideas were too radical. A second lesson from Einstein's story is the power of intrinsic motivation. Einstein was not driven by the need for external validation. He wasn't trying to win awards or accolades. His work was motivated by an insatiable curiosity about the universe and a deep commitment to understanding the fundamental laws of nature. This type of motivation, driven from within, not dependent on others' opinions, is a key factor in long-term success and fulfillment. When we are motivated by our own curiosity and passion, we are less likely to be discouraged by the inevitable setbacks we encounter along the way. Einstein's experience also teaches us the value of independent thinking. From an early age, Einstein demonstrated a tendency to think outside the box. He didn't conform to the expectations of his teachers or peers, and he didn't follow the well-worn paths laid out by others. This willingness to forge his own path was a crucial factor in his success. While his independent thinking led to many struggles with authority, it also allowed him to make breakthroughs that no one else had the courage to attempt. Psychologically, this highlights the importance of maintaining an independent mindset, even when it feels uncomfortable or isolating. The road less traveled may be lonely at times, but it can also lead to the most transformative discoveries. Finally, Einstein's story is a testament to the fact that our perceived failures can often be the gateway to unexpected opportunities. Had Einstein not been rejected from the Polytechnic, had he not struggled to find an academic job, he might never have ended up in the patent office, where he had the space and time to think deeply about his scientific ideas. These so-called failures were not just setbacks. They were detours that led him to the perfect environment for intellectual growth. In a broader sense, Einstein's journey offers a powerful message about the importance of perspective. We all face setbacks and challenges in life, but how we perceive those challenges makes all the difference. Do we see failure as a permanent state, or do we recognize it as a temporary experience that can lead to growth? Einstein's ability to reframe his failures, to see them not as reflections of his worth, but as opportunities for growth, was key to his success. What can we take from all this? The universal lesson is clear. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's an integral part of the process. The greatest minds in history, Einstein included, have faced moments of failure that would have broken lesser individuals. But rather than seeing failure as a sign of personal inadequacy, they used it as an opportunity for reflection and reinvention. The story of Einstein's early failures teaches us that setbacks don't define us. What matters is how we respond to them. So, what can we learn from Einstein's story, and how can we apply these lessons to our own lives? The psychological insights from his journey are not just for those of us pursuing scientific discovery or intellectual greatness. The principles of resilience, intrinsic motivation, and independent thinking are universally applicable. Whether you're navigating personal challenges, striving to achieve professional goals, or pursuing creative ambitions, Einstein's story provides us with valuable tools for personal growth and transformation. First, let's talk about how to reframe failure. In our culture, failure is often viewed as something negative, something to be avoided at all costs. But if we look closely at Einstein's life, we see that his greatest achievements came after some of his most profound failures. The key, then, is not to fear failure, but to view it as a stepping stone, as a part of the process, rather than a final destination. When faced with a setback, ask yourself, what is this teaching me? What can I learn from this experience? Reframing failure as a learning opportunity is one of the most powerful ways to build resilience and keep moving forward. Einstein's story also teaches us the importance of intrinsic motivation. How often do we find ourselves working toward goals that are driven by external rewards, money, recognition, approval from others. While these external incentives aren't inherently bad, they can become a distraction if they overshadow our internal motivation. Einstein was not driven by fame or fortune. He was driven by a deep curiosity about the universe and a desire to understand the fundamental laws that govern it. By cultivating our own intrinsic motivation, we can focus on the joy and fulfillment that comes from the process itself, rather than being overly concerned with external validation. To cultivate intrinsic motivation, start by identifying your own passions and curiosities. What excites you? What makes you feel alive? These are the things that can fuel you when times get tough. It's not about the accolades or the approval of others. It's about following a path that brings you joy and fulfillment, regardless of the obstacles you may encounter. Einstein's independent thinking also offers an important lesson in creativity and innovation. How often do we hold back our ideas because we're afraid of judgment or rejection? Einstein's willingness to think differently, to challenge the status quo, and to embrace new ideas despite their unpopularity is a powerful example of intellectual courage. In our own lives, we can cultivate independent thinking by asking bold questions, questioning assumptions, and allowing ourselves the freedom to think outside the box. Sometimes, the most revolutionary ideas come from those who are willing to go against the grain. Moreover, Einstein's ability to carve out space for independent thought, his time spent working at the patent office, for example, reminds us of the importance of creating an environment where we can focus on our work without the pressure of external expectations. In our fast-paced, achievement-oriented culture, it can be hard to find the time and space to think deeply and creatively. But just as Einstein made time for his passion for physics in the midst of his day job, we too can find pockets of time to nurture our own intellectual and creative pursuits, even if they seem unconventional or out of sync with mainstream expectations. A practical tip here is to seek out your own patent office space, an environment where you can focus without distractions and do the deep, meaningful work that is aligned with your passions. This space doesn't necessarily need to be physical. It could be a mental or emotional space where you feel free to explore, question, and create. It's about prioritizing your passions and setting boundaries around the time and energy you invest in your personal growth. Finally, let's talk about resilience, the ability to bounce back when faced with setbacks. It's clear that Einstein's resilience wasn't just about enduring hardship. It was about using adversity as an opportunity to grow. To build your own resilience, start by embracing challenges as opportunities for development. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? How can I use this to become stronger or smarter? By shifting your perspective on challenges, you can reframe them as opportunities for growth rather than as obstacles to your progress. One powerful way to cultivate resilience is through self-compassion. When we experience failure or face difficulties, it's easy to become self-critical and judge ourselves harshly. But Einstein's story shows us that resilience is not about never failing. It's about being kind to yourself when things don't go as planned and giving yourself the space to learn and grow. Practicing self-compassion means being gentle with yourself during times of failure, forgiving yourself for your mistakes, and treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer a close friend. The core of Einstein's journey was his relentless pursuit of truth, fueled by curiosity and an unwavering belief in his ideas. It wasn't the acknowledgement of others that kept him going. It was his intrinsic motivation to understand the universe. This is the ultimate lesson we can take from his story. The pursuit of our passions, the resilience to face failure, and the courage to think independently will ultimately lead us to growth and success on our own terms. So, the next time you face a setback, remember Einstein's journey and take it as an opportunity to reflect, grow, and continue your pursuit of knowledge, creativity, and personal transformation. As we reflect on Einstein's extraordinary journey, there are a few nuances worth exploring that shed light on the psychological complexity of his transformation. These deeper layers of his journey reveal the intricate balance between intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, the role of deliberate practice, and the psychological burden of being ahead of one's time. To truly understand the psyche of a genius like Einstein, we need to acknowledge these subtleties. Let's begin by considering the delicate interplay between intrinsic motivation and external validation. We've already seen that Einstein was driven by a profound curiosity and intellectual passion, qualities rooted in intrinsic motivation. However, no person lives in a vacuum, and Einstein was not immune to the pressures of external validation. Even the greatest minds face the psychological challenge of balancing their inner compass with the expectations of society. In Einstein's case, while his intrinsic motivation drove him to pursue groundbreaking theories, the external pressures of academic recognition were an undeniable force. After all, he did spend years working in relative obscurity at the patent office, with little recognition for his efforts. Although Einstein didn't initially seek fame, as his theories gained traction, he was inevitably thrust into the limelight. The psychological toll of this shift cannot be understated. While the external recognition was affirming, it also brought with it a new set of pressures: the expectation to continue producing groundbreaking work, the burden of public scrutiny, and the feeling of being a public figure. For someone like Einstein, who thrived in solitude and quiet reflection, the sudden attention could have been overwhelming. He was not the type to seek fame, and the psychological strain of having to navigate public life while maintaining his intellectual independence likely created an internal tension. There's a delicate balance to be struck between honoring your inner motivations and navigating the external pressures of being seen and recognized by the world. Einstein's ability to maintain his intellectual curiosity and pursue his theories with passion, despite these pressures, is a testament to his psychological strength. Another nuance to consider is the role of deliberate practice in Einstein's intellectual development. While Einstein was undoubtedly a genius, it's important to recognize that his brilliance wasn't solely the result of innate talent. He also engaged in years of intense, focused practice in his field. Deliberate practice, the idea that expertise is built through sustained, focused effort over time, was central to Einstein's growth. It's easy to view Einstein's breakthrough moments as flashes of inspiration, but the reality is that his success was built on years of steady work and intellectual exploration. Einstein spent countless hours thinking deeply, questioning existing paradigms, and refining his theories. This process wasn't easy, and it wasn't always glamorous. There were long periods of frustration, experimentation, and failure. But through deliberate practice, Einstein developed the expertise and insights that would ultimately lead to his revolutionary discoveries. The psychological concept of deliberate practice also highlights a deeper truth about genius. It's not just about raw talent, but about consistent, focused effort. This idea challenges the popular narrative of the born genius and encourages us to embrace the notion that anyone, regardless of innate ability, can achieve mastery through dedication and persistent effort. Einstein's journey shows us that intellectual brilliance is often the result of years of deliberate, focused practice, rather than some mysterious gift from birth. Finally, let's explore the psychological burden of being ahead of one's time. Einstein's theories were revolutionary, challenging the long-established frameworks of physics. But as with many great innovators, being ahead of one's time comes with unique challenges. Einstein's ideas were not immediately embraced by the scientific community. In fact, they were often met with skepticism and resistance. This is a familiar experience for many creative and intellectual individuals. When you're on the cutting edge, the world around you may not be ready for your ideas. Psychologically, being ahead of one's time can be isolating and frustrating. Einstein often found himself at odds with the scientific establishment, and this tension must have been difficult to navigate. It's important to recognize that being a trailblazer often means dealing with rejection and skepticism. The mental fortitude required to persist in the face of such resistance is extraordinary. Einstein's ability to stay focused on his theories, despite the lack of widespread support, speaks to his deep commitment to intellectual truth and his ability to maintain belief in his ideas, even when the world around him didn't understand them. The psychological burden of being ahead of one's time is a powerful theme that speaks to all of us. Often, we face moments where our ideas or ambitions are met with doubt, and it can feel as though we are standing alone. But Einstein's journey reminds us that true innovation often requires a willingness to embrace solitude, to persist despite resistance, and to trust in our own understanding of the world, even when it is not yet recognized. In these ways, Einstein's journey was not just about intellectual discovery, it was also about psychological growth. His resilience, his ability to navigate external pressures, his dedication to deliberate practice, and his unwavering commitment to his own vision offer invaluable insights for anyone striving to achieve greatness. At the heart of Einstein's journey is a profound psychological lesson. Success is not a straight line. The path to greatness is often marked by setbacks, doubts, and moments of failure. But as Einstein's story shows us, these perceived failures are not the end of the road. Instead, they are critical moments of transformation, opportunities to learn, adapt, and ultimately grow stronger. It's through embracing these challenges that we can cultivate the resilience, creativity, and intellectual courage needed to achieve extraordinary things. Einstein's early years were filled with struggles that at the time seemed insurmountable. His delays in speech, difficulties in school, rejections from academic institutions, and years spent working in obscurity could easily have been seen as signs that he wasn't cut out for greatness. Yet, it was precisely in these struggles that the seeds of his genius were planted. What appeared to be failure was, in fact, a pivotal part of his transformation. Each failure became a catalyst for deeper introspection, more focused work, and ultimately, the discoveries that would change the world. This journey is not just a historical tale of a brilliant mind. It is a universal story about the power of mindset. Einstein's ability to view setbacks as learning opportunities rather than dead ends was a key factor in his eventual success. His psychological resilience, the capacity to keep pushing forward even when the world around him seemed to be saying no, allowed him to unlock the intellectual breakthroughs that led to his place in history. For all of us, Einstein's story offers a crucial reminder. It's not the absence of failure that defines success, it's our response to it. When we fail, we have the choice to either see it as a defeat or to use it as an opportunity for growth. Einstein's story shows us that even in the darkest moments, when we feel like we're not getting anywhere, we are often laying the foundation for something remarkable. Success is not about avoiding failure. It's about understanding that failure is an integral part of the process, one that can push us to think more deeply, work more passionately, and ultimately discover new possibilities. The key takeaway here is simple. Failure, when embraced with the right mindset, is a powerful force for growth and transformation. It can lead to deeper self-awareness, clearer focus, and ultimately to breakthroughs that we could never have anticipated. The very struggles that seem to hold us back may be the ones that propel us forward. This is the essence of Einstein's journey, the transformation from obscurity and rejection to global recognition. His early years of struggle were not the end of his story, but the beginning of his transformation into one of the greatest minds in history. So when you face your own setbacks, remember that these moments are not barriers. They are the opportunities that shape you into the person you are meant to become. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep moving forward. Like Einstein, you may one day look back and see that those very struggles were the catalyst for your greatest achievements. Einstein's journey is a testament to the power of perseverance, intellectual curiosity, and the ability to turn setbacks into opportunities for growth. His story shows us that no matter where you start, no matter how many obstacles you face, the path forward is shaped by your response to failure, your commitment to curiosity, and your resilience in the face of adversity. So, as you reflect on your own journey, take a moment to ask yourself, how can I reframe my failures as stepping stones to success? How can I cultivate my own intellectual curiosity and make time for independent thinking, even in the face of external pressures? Remember, the road to greatness is never a straight path, but it's your response to the challenges you encounter that will define your journey. Like Einstein, you too can transform setbacks into profound opportunities for learning and growth. Embrace your struggles, persist in your pursuits, and never stop asking the big questions. If you found this video insightful and inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join us on this journey through the lives of legendary figures, exploring the psychological insights behind their struggles, breakthroughs, and transformations. Together, let's continue to learn and grow, because, as Einstein proved, we all have the potential for greatness, even if we don't see it at first. Thank you for watching. Keep pushing forward, and remember, the greatest breakthroughs often come from the most unexpected places.